Health Nuts, episode 30.
You're listening to Health Nuts with Dr. Chris Carr. Making lifestyle changes is hard for many people, and not knowing what to do or how to do it makes the task all the more daunting. Here at Health Nuts, we focus on helping you live a fuller life by discussing everyday health issues and exploring breakthrough solutions on how to overcome them. And now, here's your host, Dr. Chris Carr.
Welcome back to another episode of Health Nuts. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Carr, and I'm so happy to have Dr. Jerry Kennedy on today. Dr. Jerry Kennedy is a health and fitness expert, chiropractor by trade, specializes in the non-drug treatment of neck pain and back pain. He's the creator of both the Back Pain Unplugged and Neck Pain Unplugged home treatment systems. He's hosted his own local radio show and podcast, and that's how I found him. He's an author, speaker, health explorer, real food advocate, and proud dad of 3 beautiful kids. Dr. Jerry, welcome, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's actually how I found you, was on the podcast, and it's a podcast that a lot of other docs follow, not so much for the general public as we were talking before, but that's a real formal intro of you. Tell the audience where you're from and a little bit more about yourself.
I have lived in the St. Louis area pretty much my entire life. I've lived here my whole life within like 30 minutes, which means I don't get out much. I jokingly refer to myself as a corn-fed flatlander. I have 3 kids. They are 12, 8, and 6. I have to think about that, which is kind of crazy. And
some big numbers there.
Yeah. It's my daughter's starting to get to that point where you're looking at her and she's starting to look like an adult, which is kind of creeping me out a little bit. And I was a chiropractor for 9 years. I closed my practice about 4 years ago, and now I'm kind of into the world of I enjoy teaching, and so I created some products a while back that kind of teach people how to do stretches and exercises, things like that, to improve their posture. Recently, I've been teaching and kind of working with chiropractors, just helping them grow their business and connect with people. Like, my philosophy is that, we are in the people business. So the better we can relate to people and take our businesses and connect them to people in a positive way, then we can help people, but we can do it in the right way so people don't feel like they're being taken advantage of or whatever.
Right. And I'm looking forward to hearing your message, because one is that you have experience behind your belt. You've been through ups and downs, trials and tribulations, and much like anyone who's run a small business, who's come from the roots, such as we have through the chiropractic field, you've seen both the good and bad that can come with it in regard to running a business. I'm looking forward to hearing your message. It's going to be more transition towards our patients, or the patients that I currently have, and the ones you've currently had in the past, in regard to setting their goals, talking about their health goals and the challenges that come with that. So with that being said, the foundation, the goals, and if somebody's trying to reach some stuff, what do you have for them?
A lot of people have pet procedures, and this happens a lot within chiropractic, within dietary circles, where people will do something. Oftentimes it helps them, and they will then kind of determine that this is the way, like, this is how you lose weight because I lost weight that way. This is how you get out of pain because I got out of pain that way. And we do this really, even within the medical profession, there's pet techniques or medications or whatever, where they just have a tendency to go to what they know. And the problem ultimately with that is that what I tell my patients all the time is that your body hasn't read a textbook. And so when you start kind of trying to put everybody in a particular category and try to say that this works for everybody, and you really remove the individual from the process of getting out of pain, whether it could be anything, it'd be making money, growing a practice, getting out of pain, like, losing weight, all of that stuff. If you remove the individual from it, then you run into a really hit or miss situation, because you're speaking in generalities, and we're not general people. So one of the things that I always would try to get my patients to understand is the individual nature of the actual process. It's like, we're going to work with principles, but we're also working with an individual, and it's your responsibility as a patient to pay attention to what makes you unique and what your body is responding to, because that's going to help the doctor. That's going to help the people that are working with you have a better idea of what's going on. That back and forth between what we understand as from a general standpoint, and then, what's going on with you specifically, because your body doesn't read a textbook. So it's, you have to, you can't forget that you are an individual. So if you read a blog and you're excited about it, like, this is definitely going to work. It's like some version of that may work, but taking it only at face value, and when it doesn't work exactly like it says in the blog, you just completely cast it aside. That's a big mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially when you transition it over to more of the general public, and even like fad diets, and you have all these fad diets that are out there, whether it's Jenny Craig or Nutrisystem or Weight Watchers, what have you. And those foundations, they've been successful for a certain amount of people, but it's also not been not successful for a lot of the people as well. And I would agree, just because the systems work for others doesn't mean it's going to work for every single person. And
have you ever heard about the guy that does the 30 bananas a day?
No.
So like before I started doing, because I've done several podcasts, and one of them was just kind of more of a general health type of podcast. And I was in the world of like health and fitness and interviewing a bunch of people, talking to them. And I ran across this guy that basically he eats like 30 bananas a day.
That's his diet?
Yeah. And he considers himself a fruitarian. And he goes around basically telling people that this whole notion of, because there's a lot of carbs, there's a lot of massive amount of sugar in a diet like that. And because he's like a marathon runner and he's in good shape, and because he can do it, then he basically this whole decrease your sugar is nonsense. And you could just, and you're basically taking this weird outlier thing that someone can get away with, and you're trying to teach it as a general principle. And it's like, that is really the definition of like a crazy fad diet, that it's like, whoa, you need to research that a little bit.
Yeah, the amount of sugar, but with him being a marathon runner, he's probably metabolizing it so quickly.
Well, apparently, not to get too terribly graphic, but apparently his bowels are basically like smoothies.
Yeah, it would have to be. It'd be like drinking a pina colada while you're
the fiber, the sugar. I mean, it's but people do that. They find something that works for them. And now, with this day and age, with anybody can do a podcast, anybody can do a blog, anybody can create a video. And oftentimes people try to be an authority when they don't have authority.
Right.
And because they have a platform. And that's probably a cautionary tale for being careful who you listen to. You always have to do a little research. And
well, you really had such a good point. You got to be careful with what who you listen to, because a lot of times people might have had like a weekend nutrition certificate.
Yeah.
Or certain docs now can perform Botox surgeries or procedures, and they went to like school for a week for it, because it's just not their specialty. And you're so right with that. And you see it especially online, where you get all these ads on Facebook or Instagram, and you can do some research in it. Like, who is this person?
Well, I know that like in the state of Illinois, where I was licensed, we basically had an elimination degree, where our elimination licensing, we basically said you can't do drugs and surgery.
Right.
Can't do drugs and surgery. I can do energy work. I can do acupuncture. I don't even have to have any training to be an acupuncturist. I can go on eBay, buy some acupuncture needles, put a sign out saying that I'm an acupuncturist, which is crazy. Right. And so, if and that's not to beat on people that don't have like massive, extensive treatment. Everybody has to start somewhere. But as a consumer, or as a patient, or as a person that's like entrusting your health to this person, it's in your best interest to don't take things at face value, because the person you may be working with may or may not be an expert in a particular area. And that's one of the things that I actually, when working with chiropractors, one of the things I try to tell them, instead of telling them practice a certain way, what I try to tell them is, look, just be really good at what you do. Whatever it is you do. Like, if you want to do nutrition stuff, great. Just be awesome at it. If you want to do acupuncture, great. Just be awesome at it. Don't do stuff just because you can do it,
right?
And not really commit to the expertise of it. Because I think we owe that to our patients. Because if you're going to do something, you're going to offer a service, do the absolute best that you can.
And there's no other trust that someone's going to give you when they put you in, not in charge or help, but have you part of their healthcare team.
Yeah.
And when it comes to going back to the individual person who's trying to set goals, a lot of times what they do is when they're going to set these goals or find these goals, they'll search online and they're looking for guidance from others. So I think that's a great foundational piece, is that first, make sure you're listening to the right person. And then next, now we have the foundation down, who they're listening to or who they're taking advice from. What are some other steps they can take now to move the needle, if you will?
Yeah. And a lot of, for most people, what you want to do is this: you want to have the wisdom to rule out the crazy stuff. That's like for us as chiropractors, when a patient comes in, like one of our first jobs is to rule out what I call the craps. Like someone comes in and they have an issue that's like, oh my gosh, like this is an emergency. This person needs to go to the hospital. Like this is a potentially life and death thing. It's your job as a healthcare provider to be able to identify the craps. And when you are in a situation where you're going to take someone's advice, I have no problem with trying something different or trying something a little bit unique or trying something that's, heck, chiropractic is considered alternative by a lot of people. So if someone's not willing to try something, a lot of people haven't gone to a chiropractor. I was that person once. Like I didn't want to go to chiropractor because I was convinced they were quacks. And then I went and I kind of found something different, but I had to be willing to do that. But what is your responsibility? Because I think that you have to balance the willingness to try something different with the enough kind of base knowledge or research to recognize like, well, that's dangerous, like, or that doesn't make any sense at all. Those things have to be balanced, because you don't want to go so far as to say, well, I didn't see it on CNN, so I'm not going to try it. It's like, well, come on, like that's too far, So you have to find yourself somewhere in the middle and be willing to try things. But also, like, you should never shut your brain off just because someone wrote a blog, or even just because someone in a white coat or someone that's in a doctor's office said, this is what you should do. You can't shut your brain off, because that's really where you get in trouble and end up going down a path a long way that you shouldn't have gone down.
Right. And you find it, I've had a couple of patients who've gone on they've tried to do intermittent fasting, or they try to do water fast, and they're on Coumadin or they're on various blood pressure meds, and it's just completely just really caused them harm over time. And it's like, well, what happens? Well, that wasn't meant for you. You were nowhere close to where you could have been not eating for 6 days. And they're like, oh, well, that's why I got sick.
Yeah, and it's that, because a really good example is like in my own life. Several years ago, like I joke about me in my 20s I refer to myself as Fat Jerry. And I started seeing patients in student clinic, and you know how it is. Like I used to I was working out every day. I was in great shape. And I started seeing patients. I was going to school. I was commuting a long distance to school, and something has to give, and so I stopped working out. And then I got married. Then I started having kids, and it's like my ex-wife, like when she would want, it's like, oh, she wants a frozen yogurt from down the street. Like whatever size she got, I had to double it up because I didn't want her to feel bad. So it's like, oh, you got a small, I'll get a large. It's like, no, you're not overeating, honey. And so I got fat, and I just didn't know that I got fat. And I had probably, now I'm tall, like I'm right at 6'4", so I hide fat well. And which means I could be like 40 pounds overweight before I realize that I'm fat. Right. And what the lady who used to work for me, my office manager, what she used to always say is, you were in the same clothes, but every thread was working. That's how she described it.
They're working overtime to keep it together.
Yeah. And so I ended up getting invited to do a sugar fast. So this lady I knew in the area was a nutritionist, and she was doing a 21-day sugar fast, which is basically like cut out sugar, cut out your breads, your pastas, it's basically like a low carb type deal.
Right.
And I was like, sure. I got a few pounds to lose. A few is like me being nice to myself. Yeah. And I said, I'll go ahead and I'll go. And I sat there in the class. And the crazy thing is this, even as a doctor, like I'm sitting in this class, and chiropractors aren't necessarily well-versed in nutrition. There's a lot that aren't. That's an assumption.
Right.
And I was like, I took one nutrition class that in the middle of taking urine analysis and learning how to do breast exams. It's like, I don't know how to do those things either. So I went to, and I sat in this class, and I thought, I don't really eat a lot of sugar, so this isn't going to be hard for me. And then she starts talking about all this stuff that has sugar in it.
And like, oh crap.
And one of the things she said, if it ends in "ose" and rhymes with gross, it's sugar. And so I started reading labels and looking at everything, and I was like, oh my gosh, like she's basically describing my diet. And so I spent 21 days where I basically tried to cut out sugar almost completely. First day, I had massive headache, sick to my stomach. Like I felt awful. Second day, my headache was so bad that I puked before I went to work because of the headache. And by the third or fourth day, I started feeling a little bit better. And what I realized through that process was my body does so much better when I drastically reduce my sugar, my carbs. And so ever since then, everybody falls off the wagon, slips and checks, but for the most part since then, I've been very conscious of the fact that my body prefers a low carb, low sugar diet. Now, my fiance, her body doesn't do as well with that exact same diet. And her body prefers more carbs than mine does. And if she did the exact same eating that I did, she feels really run down and tired. And if I eat exactly like she does, I feel run down, tired. I get kind of a little fat belt around my waist. Right. And so you have to understand that even someone that lives in the same household as you may not have the same particulars of diet that their body really agrees to. So that willingness to explore and figure out, try this, try that. If you're, if somebody comes up with something crazy or something, like try those things, be willing to try those things. But if you have diabetes, if you have some sort of health problem, if you have whatever, you have to take those things into consideration before you go trying those things and say, am I doing something that's harmful to myself? Right. And hopefully the person recommending that to you is giving you some advice, but they may not be. And ultimately you are responsible for you. And when you have something that you're like, I would like to try this, but and we see this with supplements and other things, like you want to try something, it's possible that that's going to conflict with a medicine you're taking or a health problem that you have, and it's something that you just shouldn't do. And if that's the case, like you're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to alternate. You got to do something different.
Yeah, a lot of times that the person will get invested into whatever program they're in, and even as they're struggling, they don't course correct. They'll just keep on down that path, and they're like, screw it, it didn't work. And then they get back to their old ways.
Yeah, it's all or nothing. And a lot of times they get frustrated because a friend is doing so well, but they're not you. And you have to get that into your head where you understand that they may have found something that's amazing and works perfect for them. Now, what you don't do is this. Don't say you're doing something that you're not doing, because I see that a lot where people say, oh, I'm trying to diet. It's like, trying to diet? Right. Yeah. Like, are you really? Like, if you're going to do something, because if you're going to be a person that explores, because you really should be a health explorer and a diet explorer and an exercise explorer. If you want to figure out what is going to work best for you to get the most bang for your buck, because that's really what I'm about. Like, I want to get the most bang for my buck. Like, I want to make with the least amount of effort, get the maximum benefit. And I don't think many people are different than that. And so if that's what you want to do, what you have to do is when you're trying something, genuinely try it. Like, don't say I'm doing intermittent fasting, but you're eating in the middle of it. Right. It's like, that's not intermittent fasting. Yeah. It's like, don't say you're doing a paleo diet or you're doing a low carb thing or what, and then you're cheating every day. Right. Don't say you're doing like I'm doing a cheat day once a week and I'm doing this other strict, but then you're not. Like, you're having like, oh, well, it's just one little this and one little. The way that you figure this stuff out is you become very, very strict and rigid while you're in the initial testing phase. Once you start figuring out what your body likes and what it doesn't like, you can be a lot more lenient with that. But you're not going to get the data being sloppy, because you want it. Like, it's like when people do these elimination diets, which I don't, people may or may not be familiar with that. But if you have an allergy sensitivity and you're trying to figure out what foods you're allergic to, you have to do a hard, like, cut down of all the major things that could be causing a problem. Like, very aggressive, crappy, terrible diet for a little while, and then start adding one thing back at a time. But if you're sloppy with that process, you get no data. You just ruined your diet for a month. Like, you didn't get any additional information. You just made yourself miserable. And so if you're strict with it, then you can start figuring out. And I had a teacher one time that told me he found out that he was allergic to tomatoes that had been packaged in cellophane. Who figures that out?
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, but he was so particular about keeping track of what he ate and what was bothering him, because he had some digestive problems. And he's like, I ate this, and then this is what happened. And he really went through this process of being very particular and exploring like what is going on, and took responsibility for that and got it narrowed down to he can eat tomatoes. He can eat tomatoes in any way, shape, or form. But if they've ever been put in those little cellophane packs for whatever reason, there's some sort of transferred weird thing that happened that just messed him up. But
that's what it was.
You never would have figured that out being sloppy. No way.
No. One of the things I always tell patients whenever they're in the process of changing with X, Y, and Z, diet or plan, I said the biggest muscle you've got to develop is your discipline muscle. Because until you become disciplined for it, until you kind of draw that line in the sand and say, you know what, today's the day and that I'm done, I'm getting ready to change. Yeah. You end up going, like you said, you're tiptoeing into this lifestyle change or into this goal that you're trying to reach. And then when it doesn't work a month later, you're like, I'm out.
And really what it is, it's not about overcoming fear. It's not about what it is it's the decision that something else is more important. Like that's what it is. Like if you make the decision because you have what you have now and you're making the decision that you have. And what I always say is like, when you look in the mirror, you're not seeing who you are. You're seeing who you were. You're seeing a reflection of your choices that you made 6 months ago, 6 years ago, 6 days ago. You're not seeing who you are right at that moment. And if you don't understand that delay, there was a commercial not too long ago, and I wish I could remember what it was about. But this guy gets on the scale. He's kind of a heavier, kind of a chunky guy, gets on the scale, looks at the number, gets off the scale, does a lap around the gym, gets back on the scale, sees the same number, and then he hits the scale. Like he hits the side of the scale. And it made me laugh because I'm like, that's what we do. Whether it's business problems, health problems, family problems. I used to tell my patients all the time, I do not believe in big problems. I believe in that big problems are only small problems that were left alone. And this is coming from a guy that's been divorced. And my marriage didn't have big problems. My marriage had a bunch of small problems that I was irresponsible with and I ignored, and I didn't take care. I didn't address things when they were smaller problems and little things, and I let them get out of hand. And your health is the same way. Those little things that you think are insignificant, they add up to massive differences when you're, 5 years from now and 10 years from now. But on the flip side of it, those small positive changes that you decide to do, they add up to you being a completely different person in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year. And it starts with just deciding that I've had enough. Like you kind of have to have a screw it moment and you just say, I'm just going to do it. And, I talk about Fat Jerry. Anybody that's lost a bunch of weight has had what I call a fat moment. And your fat moment is like, it could be a picture, a reflection, a comment, a joke, a video, but it's a moment in time where the blinders got ripped off and you saw yourself for what you were and you said, enough is enough. Like I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And that's the decision. In my fat moment, we moved in, I'll tell you the story because it's funny. We moved into a new house and the master bedroom closet was in the master bathroom. And it had the folding mirror doors. So you got folding mirror doors and you have a couple vanities. Like this is a minefield for seeing yourself at angles that you don't normally see yourself. And I was in there one day shortly after we moved in. I was getting ready for work and I just had my underwear on and I bent over to pick something up and I saw a fat bald man in my bathroom.
So who's that guy?
And what was more disturbing is he was wearing my underwear. And I got up and I was like, oh my gosh. And my first thought was, I have the confidence of a much more attractive man. Like I just didn't know. Like I just didn't know. And I had this moment of like, oh my gosh. And what you have to decide is that, and for some people it's, they want to see their kids, they want to walk their kids down the aisle, or they want to see their grandkids, or they want to get back playing golf, or they're tired of sleep, having crappy night's sleep, whatever it is. Like you have to get to this point where you have a screw it moment where you say, enough is enough. Like and that's different for every person. We talk about the individuality. It doesn't have to be noble. It doesn't have to be some sort of spiritual epiphany. It doesn't have to be some grandiose. Like for me, with my patients, like what I always wanted to figure out was what's your motivation? Because if you're motivated by getting into a little black dress, then crap, let's get you in that little black dress. If you're motivated by sticking around longer to see your daughter walk down the aisle, I'm all for that too, but I'm not going to criticize you for your motivation. Like you just have to find it. And
find that
I don't
moment.
care what it is. Yeah, but you need to find that, like, this is, it's, the decision that something else is more important. Like being in that little black dress is more important than eating Taco Bell.
Right. And have an aha moment and decide that now's the day. Mm-hmm. Awesome. I'm going to throw some questions at you. You ready?
Sure.
So first one, 3 things that make you a health nut.
I always tell people I'm not a health nut.
but Fat Jerry wasn't a health nut. So what's Skinny Jerry?
Yeah. Skinny Jerry is very conscious about, Skinny Jerry is more disciplined, meaning that I don't mindlessly eat. So Skinny Jerry does not mindlessly eat. Even if I eat something poor or not good for me, or I like peanut butter M&Ms, you know what I mean? I'm very aware of what I'm doing, and Fat Jerry mindlessly ate. Yeah. Skinny Jerry works out, exercises, and you can exercise away a bad diet. People will think that it's a total farce. Can't do it. There's nothing you can do to exercise away a bad diet. But
I completely agree.
But what the exercise allows me to do is I like the way I feel. Like I'm pushing 40 now, and I'm in better shape, and I feel better, look better at 40 than I did at 30. And so I'm excited about that. I'm happy about that. And as far as I think something that makes me a health nut is kind of what we talked about, is my willingness to try something different. Yeah. That open-mindedness to a tweak in a diet, a tweak in an exercise, trying something different, and just seeing how my body responds. And if it doesn't respond well, I go back to the things I know, and I kind of stay with my baseline. But I'm always willing to be like, oh, let's, I recently tried, doing some things that I normally wouldn't do, just to see how my body responds. And, if I hurt myself, or I end up gaining weight, or I don't like the way I feel, then I go back to what I know. But I'm always trying to beat that baseline, like whatever my baseline is.
Best advice you ever got?
Best advice I ever got was probably from my dad, and said, if you can't pay cash for it, you don't need it.
My dad said the same thing.
I used to think my dad was crazy. And the older I get, I realize he was a genius. Yeah. And,
well, they said we develop into our fathers or mothers. So I guess that's a good thing then, if he's a genius.
Yeah. My father passed away. I sat down, and I didn't want to make it about him not being around anymore, because when you cry for someone, it's because a light went out, it's like they were something good. Somebody good is not with us anymore, and I sat down and I wrote out like all these random things that I learned from my dad. And it was just I wish I had done it, because we knew he was dying. He had cancer, and we knew he was dying. I wish I would have done it beforehand, and just shared it with him. Because he was full of a lot of sage advice. It's kind of one of those, like, it's simple advice, but the more you think about it, you're like, yeah, Dad's right. Yeah. And he'd tell me, I'll tell you his female advice for me, which is not good at all. It's good and it's not good at the same time. Is I would call him and I'd complain about, like, oh, this is going on, or that's going on, or whatever. And he would listen, and he would go, sounds like you're dealing with a woman. And I'm like, 40 years?
That's all you got.
40 years of marriage, and that's what you got? Sounds like you're dealing with a woman. And that was his way of saying that, if you want to be in a relationship with someone that you understand, you have to find someone that's exactly like you, and that's not how relationships work. And there's kind of a lot in that, where you're just kind of going, getting upset with someone because they're not like you is kind of silly, because we would get sick of ourselves really quick. So my dad was probably full of a lot of really good advice that he gave me over the years. So.
That's awesome. Nice share. Appreciate you sharing that. Lastly, so 2 more. Last one is, before I get to that, someone who's out there, they're struggling, might have been, the fat Jerry that's listening, that's no longer the fat Jerry.
Yeah.
They're struggling. They've tried this stuff. They tried to change their life, and, they failed multiple times, and now they're just frustrated and angry at the world, and just life's not going their way. What do you tell them?
What I would say is, I would say that never underestimate the power of a small change. Like what we do a lot of times when someone's having really bad financial problems, or they're 100 pounds overweight, or, my brother's a really heavy guy. My family looks at me and they refer to me as the lucky one, which is funny because like I can get fat. Like
you choose not yet.
Yeah, I live not to. I don't.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one in my family that lives in a way that I don't. And therefore it's not luck, it's decisions. And I think a lot of times what we end up doing is kind of back to the whole big problems thing. And when you're trying to solve big problems, you're setting yourself up for failure. When you're trying to make big changes, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I heard someone recently, I'm always listening to different people speak and trying to read things and, just kind of learn. And somebody said recently that one of the keys to achieving your goals is to make them stupid achievable, like ridiculously achievable. And so if you're having trouble exercising, why don't you set a goal for doing one push-up a day? And what'll happen is this, there's something that happens, that there's a momentum that happens with small changes. It's like me telling you to floss one tooth.
Right.
Like you might as well just do some more while you're in there, and you will, will. Like if you're down on the floor, you do one push-up, you may do one push-up one day. And then the next day you do another push-up. But then you'll find yourself eventually doing 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And when I was going through my divorce, I used to play sports all the time, and I was really competitive in basketball. And I felt like I lost something when I couldn't play basketball anymore. And because that was so much of my life, and it was so much of that competition and push. I wasn't going for anything. I wasn't striving for anything. And so I was going through my divorce, and I was really just mentally, emotionally, just a terrible time. Mm-hmm. And I wanted something to focus on. And what I decided to do was, I'm going to do a pull-up. Because even though I had lost some weight and I was in pretty good shape, like I'm also 6'4", and my thought was, I'll be really good at pull-ups if I ever lose my legs in a horrific accident. I weigh too much. I can't. I'm not set up for this. Gymnasts are little short, muscly people. Like I'm not. I'm long. I'm thin. Like it's whatever. And so I went into the gym and I'm going to see how many pull-ups I can do. I've never been good at pull-ups, and I did 1.5. And I counted that half because that's 50% more than the one. And what I decided to do was like, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to work on this. And it was terrible. Like it was horrible. Like it was horrible pull-ups. And it's like, but just little by, it's just consistency. It's just every day going in and like, I'm going to try to do a pull-up and then I'm going to try to do 2. And if I do 1.5 or 1 3/4, like I'm just going to try. And I got to the point where it's like, I could do 25, 30 pull-ups, like unassisted, unhelped pull-ups. But it was terrible. It was embarrassing. Like it was, but it was just, it's never underestimate one little step in the right direction and the power of the sticking with that one step. Because this is what you don't do. Never, ever, ever go 2 times in a row breaking your new goal or new habit. Like don't, like that is a absolute death nail. We'll talk about like New Year's resolutions, things like that. Like you have one day where you screw up your diet. Don't do 2. You draw a line in the sand and do not do 2. You do 2 and you might as well just kill the whole thing. And so you're going to have days that you screw up. You're going to have times you don't get up and you don't exercise. You're going to have times you don't get to bed on time. You're going to have times where you miss your appointment, whatever that is. Don't do 2. You do 2 and it's a kiss of death for your new habit. So tiny, tiny little goals and never mess up twice in a row.
I love that.
If you do that, you'll be all right.
I love that. Yeah. So how I found you is just from your podcast, because I'm in the industry and that's how I came across you. For those of you who are looking to find you, for the docs that listen to this or docs who kind of follow my stuff, following the podcast, if they're trying to reach out to you, will you talk to them real quick?
BlackSheepDC.com is my website. I have the podcast is the WBS podcast. It stands for Weekly Black Sheep, and I was calling it the Weekly BS podcast for a while, and people are like, I thought it was funny.
They didn't catch it.
So enough people didn't catch it that I recently changed it to just WBS, just because I don't want to upset. It's like I'm not that way. So I recently changed it, but I have a podcast. That I think I'm on the 143rd or 4th episode now. So I've been doing that for a little while. I got
a lot of work to try to catch you.
Dude, it's consistency. Yeah. Like that's all it is. It's like, it's just getting up and doing it. Because I've done several podcasts. I've never broke the 100 mark. I did a podcast. Very first one I did, I was in practice still. And I don't remember how many I did there, probably like 15 or 20. And then with closing the practice and all the stuff that was going on there, I ended up taking a break. I had the Dr. Jerry Kennedy show, which is a little slightly narcissistic. That was whatever. That was my most popular one. That was way bigger podcast than what the WBS one is. But the WBS podcast is just for chiropractors. We talked about that, where it's like, listen, if you're not a chiropractor, don't listen to our podcast. Like you're not going to like it. You're not going to find any value in it.
Right.
But that's blacksheepdc.com. You'll find all the podcasts and newsletter. You'll find all that information.
And I'll put those links in the show notes to anyone who is listening where this is applicable to you. Doc, you shared a lot, buddy.
Hey, I'm happy to do it. I have the gift of gab.
Yeah, it's a good gift to have, and it's one that's welcome here. And I appreciate you dropping all your knowledge and your years of practice and sharing what you have to say. And I appreciate you giving back today.
I'm glad we can do it. It's fun.
Yeah, awesome. Best of luck to you, and I'll talk to you soon. And you're welcome. To the audience, talk to you soon. God bless. Have a great week. Bye now.
So, you've heard from the experts yourself this episode and have gotten some golden nuggets on health. There is so much more to come and so much more to learn. Head on over to pghcw.com. Again, that's pghcw.com. And sign up for our newsletter where you'll receive free info on how to get and stay healthy. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Health Nuts with Dr. Chris Carr. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and please leave a review.